Good morning, Mike Berlin here, chairing. I'd like to thank you all for showing up, and we'll get this meeting under way. The Finance Economic Development Committee meeting for May 25th, 9 o'clock. Call to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mike Berlin,
Here.
Laura Negro,
Here.
Blake Ellefson,
He's here.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Ron Stendor,
Here.
We have a quorum. Let's take a look at our agenda, see if we need to amend or approve this agenda.
This is Pat. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. Ron Stender will second.
We have a motion by Pat, second by Ron to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 3, public comments. We have a number of people on online here. And anyone have any public comments? 3 minutes. Public comments, anyone? Last call. Any public comments? Thank you. Moving on, let's go to the item number 4, approval of the Finance Economic Development meeting of April 20th. We all had a chance to take a look at this, or do we need a minute?
I still can't get into my email, so.
Oh,
This is Pat. I'll make a motion to approve. Ron Stender will second.
we have a motion by Pat to approve the minutes, second by Ron. Any questions, comments? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 5, health insurance.
All right,
Good morning.
we have M3 here to give you an update.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, Kelly, will you pull up the HPPM? Thanks, everyone, for having me. Kristen Schmidt with M3 Insurance.
It says that I'm not allowed to screen share. The host has disabled it.
Did we include the HPPM, Dan?
Yeah, it's in the packet, but I just made you co-host.
Okay, perfect. Kelly will pull it up just so we can talk through this. No, still won't work.
Nope. It says host is disabled screen sharing or participant.
Go ahead, you're co-host now too, Kelly.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone see it okay?
Yes.
Great. So you guys, this is a report that we send to the county every month once we receive claims for the previous month. So this is through April, I believe. And what this is showing you is in the top left corner is your current funding ratio or your loss ratio. So prior month was 86.4, but prior year to date was 107.8. And that's what I want to highlight. So we are running better than we had last year at this time, which I think is really positive. So this just gives you all of the information from a running 12 months. The graph shows us where we've been and kind of where we're going. We did have a bit of a higher month in April of 2023, which is not surprising. People are likely hitting their deductible if they've had claims. So this is the breakdown of all of those pieces. Kelly, if you can go to the second page. This breaks it out in a little bit of a different way, but essentially the same information. So you guys only have one health plan. It shows total fixed cost, net medical claims, net prescription claims, and then your total variable cost. And then the last slide is again the last page is again just the same information broken apart. You can see in March and April where the paid claims over stop loss. So we have had a couple people hit the stop loss. I believe it's one person who's had some medical claims that we're continuing to work through. But otherwise, compared to last year, you guys are in a very, very different and much better place. We do also have a pre-renewal forecast. So Kelly, if we can slide to that. What this document does is it really takes you through all of the numbers behind your plan. So if you look at the trend assumptions, we do have to forward forecast. So medical trend right now is about 6%, prescription is 10. We blend that trend together to make a 6.4. We have your renewal date as a 1/1/2024. Your projected end date is 12/31/2024. And then if we go into historical claims experience, I think this is where we can kind of see some of the numbers in a little bit more depth. So that first line is medical claims, and we do a rolling 12 months. So it's 5/1/22 to 4/30/23. You can see there's 2.5 million in claims. However, the prior year, 5/1/21 to 4/30/22 was 3.1 million. Then if we go down to the next, we can see paid prescription drug claims. Those are higher than they were previously. We do have a new program in place, and we're hoping to see some better results from that. Kelly, if you can go back up a little bit. And then if you'll look at the less pooled claims, so that means anything that's gone to stop loss. So currently we're at 578. And last year at this time with the rolling 12 months, we were at 890. So then the math just breaks everything down. Currently, we're at a weighted average claims per member per year of 20,000. We take that total, divide it by total enrollment. So the 2.5 is your projected medical claims for this upcoming plan year. We divide that by 127. Then we add in the fixed cost, which we have sitting there. You can see that we have added in a 15% stop loss increase. So we do that because we want to make sure we're projecting ahead appropriately. That leaves our total fixed cost at 1 million. And then we take the overall projected plan year expenditures, the projected funding with current rates, and we show an increase of about 9% that we're expecting for 1/1/24. Now, what that doesn't take into consideration is if we want to consider plan changes or what our actual final stop loss will be. So those things are variable, but we wanted to show you this just as an example. If we were to renew for, say, June 1st, this is what we would be looking at for your plan. Any questions I can answer on that? So I do want to share just a couple more things. So there is a new network that is in your market that is doing some really great things. And so we will likely be looking at a network change for January 1st. It will not exclude any of the current large carriers or where the majority of people are going, but we do think it will provide us with a deeper discount. So that is something that we can look to and hopefully will bring us some additional savings. We have implemented a wellness plan. We met with that team yesterday and solidified all of it. They're going to be rolling it out in the next month. That will give employees an opportunity to receive a premium credit or rebate for 2024. And we believe that will also help us look at the health of your entire population and be able to drive down costs again. We have also built in a transparency tool, which we launched on January 1st, but we're going to do some additional education on in the next coming months. I have been asked by multiple department heads and other folks within the county to present to their department head meetings, talk through insurance, talk through wellness, talk through the incentive program, which is the transparency tool. So I will be doing that in the upcoming 2 months. So I feel like that's a really positive thing to have more time to talk to people about this and really share what's happening within your health insurance program and to be able to talk to them about how they can help us continue to keep the plan that you have, retain the employees that you have, but also bring some potential savings to the plan.
We have a question here, Pat.
In our packet, we had on the first screen you showed us, we had the data through March, and what you displayed today had the data through April. And I look back at our previous meeting, and it was sort of the same thing of a lag of a month and a half or close to 2 on the data we saw. So as we go forward, if you have more current data that you can share with us, if there's a way of getting to us, and updating the packet, because this last month there, that really jumped up in terms of our costs. That really, and I think in the packet, it was around 84% funding ratio, in that range. And now it jumps up to this. But the explanation of people hitting their deductible is helpful. And it also explains a rationale for looking at a 12-month rolling average so that you incorporate these changes, how people use their healthcare over time. But a question I have is the number of participants that we have has been declining for a period of time. And I'm curious, why that is, if we think that might continue, and in part because are we losing participants that might have lower healthcare costs than the average here, which would mean the pool that we have left would have on average higher costs, which would mean that the average increase for employees that remain would be going up more than otherwise.
That's a really great question. So Pat, thank you for noting that you have the through March. We literally got this delivered to us yesterday.
Okay.
So we will absolutely in the future, if it's going to be on this kind of tight of a timeline, make sure that we get that over and that Dan gets that distributed out. So I appreciate that note. As far as declining enrollment, I'm going to be honest, I don't know. That would be a question for Dan or Heather. Dan, do you have any insight on that as to people, like, is it people who've left the county entirely? Or do we know where that kind of enrollment is declining from?
No, we don't, but I can guess that it's new employees not taking the insurance because their spouse carries it.
Okay. Yeah. And one of the things I could offer for the next meeting we have, which will be closer to renewal, that I'm happy to come to, would be to offer up some benchmarking and kind of show you guys where your plan is compared to others in the market. So we also work with the Ashland School District, and we work with some other groups up there that are public entities. So I have some very specific benchmarking data that I could share, and it might be a great start to the conversation about, do we need to talk about adjusting your plan to make it more along the average and have the premiums go down, or what kind of changes do we want to look at for moving forward?
And then the other part related to that is we have a fairly small pool of people. And would there be any benefit to going in, say with a school district, the city, if we work that out to have a larger pool to spread that risk out as far as rates that everybody's paying?
Pat, I think that's a great, I believe that was Pat again. I think that's a great idea. Currently, the school district is a part of the trust with a bunch of other school districts, but it is a conversation that I have had, and I think that it's something that we should continue to explore. And I will do that as your broker, knowing that I have a relationship with the city and the school district, and have that conversation to say, is there an opportunity for you guys to come together as a group? We can look at captive solutions. We could look at, creating a co-op or a consortium and having the three of you together. It would look a little different because there's some fully insured and some self-funded in that mix, but I'm absolutely happy to explore that.
Laura?
Thank you for the update on the wellness, because I was going to ask about that.
I love that, Laura. So yeah,
did we get into place, like you had said, someone that they can call when they have procedures and find, the highest quality of care and the lowest price for us?
Yep.
All right, that's two. And Pat had you on the reports thing. My thing is if we can see what that data is, because as cool as a guess is, Dan, I don't think this is a you thing. I feel like our insurance place should know what people are dropping off and when we're getting on. We don't have to have names or anything. We can just have an age bracket, three
Yep.
people in the 50 to 55 or something like that. So,
And we will explore that, Laura, differently. I don't have that at my fingertips, but I will absolutely have that for you and can get that over to Dan too. Because it's interesting to me that it's been throughout this plan year. So that tells me it's not new hires, it's existing people.
Yeah.
And is that retirement? Is that, so
Yeah.
we'll explore that data and get that back to you. And as far as the transparency and the wellness, that's really what your wellness committee and I are going to focus on in the upcoming 2 to 3 months. I want to get into as many department head meetings, as many divisions, all of those things to be able to talk to the employees and explore this with them and share this detail with them so that they can start utilizing it even more than they have.
Thanks,
okay.
Laura. Blake?
Hey, so if I boil it all down, it looks like 9% would be the increase over this year that you would kind of quote us going into 2024. And I guess my feeling is, okay, if we do the things that we're advertising, like the wellness, and we continue to work around the edges of making our program a little bit better, does it look like long-term we would have like more stabilized rates? Or is it pretty consistent across the market that a 9% increase is likely going to be in place? And I know that's hard to project out, but just
Yep.
kind of curious on, where are we going long-term with our insurance rates?
Yep. So Blake, there's a couple things that I want to explore for you. Well, one main thing, which is looking at a captive. So a captive is a bunch of private and public entities that are self-funded, and they come together to create basically a private health insurance product. And we've had a lot of traction with a lot of our currently self-funded groups doing that, because what it does, Blake, is stabilize your renewal. So inside that captive cell, people often have renewals that are less than 5% on a consistent 5-year basis. So to me, that's something for us to explore moving forward to consider. I will tell you, Blake, 9% is actually low for what we're seeing renewals to be. We are seeing a lot of renewals in the 15 to 25% range. And it's truly because of the biosimilars and all of the pharmacy pieces that are coming out that have not been available before. And our stop loss companies are asking, or stop loss companies are preparing themselves for people to be jumping on those medications. Now, we have a medication program in place that I do believe we'll be able to show some savings from, actually a fair amount of savings from, but we need to continue to use that program and utilize it, because if I could say you had a 9%, I would sadly be slightly comfortable with that compared to what I am seeing in the market. So I think we need to continue to explore the options for you guys to make sure that we're able to stabilize your renewals, because that is the biggest challenge for all of our clients.
Thanks, Blake. Ron, I saw you had a light on. Did you have something? You're good? This is the information only. Laura, one more?
Also, when talking about this renewal, I'd like to see what kind of trends, especially when looking at the population of people that we have, what kind of things we should be watching out for, what kind of plans we should having, because I'd like to keep an eye on this at least a 5-year out. I understand our populational turnover, but if we plan for those people to be there at the 5 years and then shift it along the way, we need to be keeping track of this a little better.
Okay, Laura, I'll do some breakout on age on your current population, and then we have our trend report coming out in the next really 2 weeks. And so I'll use that information, which is statewide, and then we also have it split within our education and government practice group per area. So I will share that benchmarking. I'm happy to come to the next meeting or 2 meetings from now and share that along with your age demographics. And I think that's a great call out, Laura, and we'll just continue to add to that data as the years go on.
Okay, cool. And you know me, you could always just email them to me. So
Yes, I will for sure. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Laura. I just have one housekeeping issue I'd like to address. in our future meetings, can we have someone with a pointer pointing to the area on the document that we're discussing for the sake of our county board members that's online that cannot and that does not have this information in front of them so that they can follow along? I would appreciate that. Thank you. Have a good
Yep.
day.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Next on our agenda, I'd like to introduce Sheldon Johnson from Northwest Regional Planning.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Glad you can make it.
Yeah, it was a great drive today.
So,
You want me to just kind of start in? Yeah, how about if I, hopefully everybody can hear me well enough. Why don't I just give you an overview of who we are, who I am, who we are as a planning commission, and some of the things that we do in the realm of economic development and community planning as well. So again, my name is Sheldon Johnson. I'm the executive director at Northwest Regional Planning Commission. I've been the director since 2016. I've been with staff almost 30 years at the Planning Commission. Been to a number of your county board meetings and some city council meetings here in Ashland County as well over that time. My primary emphasis in my background at the Planning Commission has been working in transportation planning, community development, community plans, comp plans, grant writing. Back in the day, I helped write a T grant for Ashland County, I believe it was, or City of Ashland, for the ABC Rail Company that was here at a time for that rail line that went in there into their facility. So I've been engaged in activities. I work with Carver Harries as well as it relates to economic development components that are happening in the county or information that we might get that we share up to he. So as it relates to the Planning Commission, we're a small staff. We've got 14 staff members that cover really four key component areas. One being housing. We administer 16 different revolving loan funds and the Northwest Regional Housing Program that's available throughout the county. One of those small revolving loan funds that we administer is also the City of Ashland's Community Development Block Grant Housing Rehab Program. So we have staff in that section. We have a section on environmental services where we perform our RU responsible unit administration for Burnett, Washburn, and Douglas counties. So the recycling programs that they took responsibility of back in the 90s, we administered for them that program. And then inside that environmental services is also our household hazardous waste program. So in that capacity, we work closely with Lissa Racke here in Ashland County to help coordinate and develop that program that we're going to be holding here in June 20 or 21. I can't remember the exact date.
20.
Thank you. So on June 20th, we'll be having the household hazardous waste event at the Northwoods Technical College parking lot, as we've had in the last number of years. That partnership is financially contributed by all of the counties that participate. And then we leverage those dollars to receive approximately a $55,000 DAT cap grant that helps contribute towards the overall costs and expenditures for that program annually. So your contributions are matched with some DAT cap funds out of the state of Wisconsin. Then we also have our community planning work that we do. That's probably the largest task of the things that we do for communities, including your county. And I'm just going to rip through some of the things and talk about that. Hopefully it's okay, Mr. Chair. Just talk about some things. So currently, we do have a contract with Ashland County for the hazard mitigation planning grant to update your plan. We're awaiting the future hire of your director for the emergency management program. Once that happens, we'll be engaged with that person moving forward on the update to that plan. As it relates to comprehensive planning, we're actively engaged with communities at the town to the county level. Just as an example, I know that's something that you all are talking about sometime in the future to update your county plan. We are currently finishing up the Bayfield County plan update. That'll be completed sometime a little bit later this summer. They received a Wisconsin Coastal Management Grant to help offset the cost for that. We would expect that you also could likely be a recipient of those funds. Those applications are due in November, and I can talk more later with Dan on that. Bayfield County received almost $30,000 in grant funds to help contribute towards the update of their countywide plan. Again, the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program is available only to communities and counties that are adjacent to Lake Superior or the Great Lakes. So that's something that you would really want to look at applying for. It is a it's a July to June funding cycle. You apply in November of 23. If you were awarded, you would know sometime in the spring of the year, and then you would receive those grant funds to do a 1-year project that would commence July 1st, 24 and wrap up June of 25, and something like that.
Can I jump in here for a second? Let me throw a question at Pat over here. Would this be something that we would want to bring Northwest in on this bio center? On the bio center that we'll be meeting with the Battle Tribe tomorrow?
I
would that-
think it's.
Or would this be too soon?
Well, you mentioned the Wisconsin Coastal Management Grant. When the feasibility was done, they did provide some grant funding for the proposed science center up here. There's a meeting tomorrow at Bad River with the county ADC and some others. So I believe it would make sense to consider applying for another Wisconsin Coastal Management Grant, depending on how things move forward here. But, you know, as far as being on Lake Superior and update to our comp plan, if the city and the county and others are looking at a science center, that would, you know, it would make sense to consider that into the comp plan. So, but yes, that's one of the reasons that I'm interested in talking to Northwest Regional Planning is if that science center moves forward, we need to, you know, look at every way of helping that project.
Yeah, I'd be happy to learn more about that program. I'm not familiar with it right now, but you know, if there's something that the office or our staff could contribute towards that process, we'd be happy to engage in whatever manner we can for sure. Yep. So that's the comp plan. So we do that. We're also working with Burnett County on their comp plan update. Just as a general ballpark for all of you, in terms of if you're wondering or going to ask me what the costs are for these updates, they're running anywhere between $55,000 and $65,000 for a comp plan update. So that's what we're engaged with those two counties in that price range. Burnett County has an additional add-on for some survey work. We're doing an online survey for them, and that's an additional cost outside the parameters which I just described financially. And then also on the planning side, I've been participating with Lissa Racky's EV planning group that engaged here a couple months ago. So I'm just sitting in as an advisor more so than anything under our rural transportation grant program that we receive at the office. Just providing some information, listening to what's happening up here in Ashland County. Also, the coordinated transportation plan that all counties have to update every 5 years. We lead that on behalf of the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. So we received some grant funds to help coordinate that through the appropriate agencies in the county. I've got a kickoff meeting with WISDOT staff next week, where we'll be talking about what the cycle is, what changes are to those coordination plans. And then I'll be reaching out to the appropriate staff at BART, internal to the county as well. And in Bayfield County, because I think we did a joint jurisdictional coordination plan the last couple of cycles. So I'll be working with them on that. There's no cost to the county for that. That's just part of our doing business.
So you're aware that Pat runs our BART here in Ashland and that we've expanded down south and so on like that. So,
Yep.
so it's a coordinated effort through you folks or with you.
Correct. The coordination plan will, again, it's not a coordination. I'm not trying to coordinate anything with them on their expansion to Price County or the current structural routes. Our coordination plan states the state requires that anybody applying for grant funding through the Wisconsin Department of Transportation Public Services Program has to have this coordination plan. It's basically a roadmap on what are the needs for public transit. And then those applications that BART and others would apply to the state for have to align with that coordination plan.
I guess where I'm going at here is that you service 10 counties.
Yes.
And of course, so we go down into Price County and Vilas County, stuff like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
So we're intermixing with their transit as well, with BART.
Right.
So, that's a Pat thing. So,
Yep. Yep. So I'll coordinate with him for sure
Mhm.
as part of this coordination plan update. It's required to be done. The plan has to be updated by the end of December, middle of December.
Is
So
this a state mandate?
it's not a state mandate. It's required by WISDOT that when these entities apply for 5310 projects, Wisconsin's 5310 applications for transit assistance, usually it's vehicles that they're purchasing. It has to be identified in their coordination plan, how it ties to their vision, to their goals. So we just need to make sure that we have it updated.
Good.
This will be the fourth year that we've updated this, the fourth time we've updated this plan. So it's every 5 years.
Let me throw a question at Dick here. Has Pat ever mentioned that to us on the board meeting? This coordinated plan? Has Pat ever mentioned this to us at the BART meeting? I don't get to attend all the BART meetings, but I don't recall this coming up at a BART meeting.
Yeah, and this plan, should be clear too. It does not require any action by any governmental entity. It's just a planning update that the coordinated group, which represents BART and other transportation providers within the county.
That's information only.
Yeah. It's not an adopted plan that they would be bringing to you for approval. That's probably why you've never heard of it or never seen it.
Mhm.
There's no requirements by WISDOT that it has to be approved by a governmental entity.
Those are covered under some of the unforeseen action items that they do that we don't
Yes.
know that they do.
Yes, correct. Yes, yeah. They have a document that they're using as a guide
Okay.
to assist them in their future purchases of vehicles and perhaps route expansions as well. So, yep. And then two more things before I move on to the economic development side. You probably all know that the Public Service Commission has funded a BEAD program. That's a broadband equity program that's going to be looking at broadband across the counties. Each county over the last 3 or 4 months, each county received correspondence from the Public Service Commission to determine whether they wanted to go on their own and do a planning look at broadband in their community, or they could hire or they could join on with a regional economic development organization, which I'll describe what the redo is a little bit later. But at the end of the day, to shorten my presentation, Ashland County and 8 other counties, along with Bad River, joined a letter of intent to go with the regional economic development organization known as Visions Northwest to help in developing a broadband assessment within the 9 counties and Bad River Tribal Nation. So that application, those letters of intent were submitted back in March or April. We've just seen the final contract from PSC. And when I say we, within Northwest Regional Planning Commission, and we're working on submitting that application by the deadline of June 19th, or the final contract, I should say, by June 19th. So myself and Crystal Rohde in our office will be working on that broadband planning assessment for the communities that are part of that collective. We've already had our first meeting, and Dan represents Ashland County on that committee, the broadband committee for Northwest Wisconsin. We had our first meeting, which we identified some draft goals, a vision, brainstorms on some opportunities and barriers for broadband. And then that is some of the key deliverables that we had to provide to the PSC by June 19th. So we're underway. It's a 2-year project that we'll be working on over the next 2 years. We expect that this kickoff meeting that we had was the first, was just happened this month, early this month. And we have until May of 2025 to complete the process. So I'll be giving you more information, or perhaps Dan will be in time, but that process just started. It is not a funded program to put fiber in the ground, but rather an assessment to look at what are the opportunities for fiber, where are what limitations are there for fiber, where are the gaps as it relates to that. We also expect to have some coordination meetings with providers in communities, and using the committee, the Northwest Wisconsin Broadband Committee, to help facilitate some of those talks. So there'll be more information coming on that. We just really started it only in the last month or so. And then lastly, I want to talk about the Northwest Wisconsin, or the Northern Wisconsin Community Network. It's a rural partners network. So back under the Biden administration, a year ago, the Biden administration created a the first cohort that works directly with USDA Rural Development to be a community network. A second cohort was identified in the last month or in the last several months. And USDA Rural Development in the state identified a number of different counties and tribal nation that would be eligible to be considered a community network. Ashland County and Iron County were identified as such possible networks. And in coordination with the two counties, a meeting was held in Glidden, and then one was also held in Hurley. And those meetings brought on the idea of, rather than having Ashland County submit a letter of intent on their own and Iron County putting a letter of intent on their own, it was discussed that those two counties could collaborate together and submit a joint application for a letter of intent for designation to be a community network. In those discussions, representatives from Price County were also in attendance. And with the with Price County's ties to Ashland County, the southern portion of Ashland County, the things that are happening, the overlap of school districts, it was thought that it would be a good application effort to have Price County be part of that. And that was actually submitted. So Price County, Ashland County, and Iron County submitted a letter of intent to be a community network. There were other applications that were submitted across the state, 4 others, and USDA Rural Development approved all 5 applications to be a community network. The Planning Commission, we signed on as the host to the entity or to that group. And so successfully the application or the letter of intent was approved. So what does that mean to you? In the last month, USDA Rural Development has hired 3 field staff for the state of Wisconsin that will be working directly with these community network partners. Nathan and Laura from Rural Development are our key points of contact for the community network. Their directive, they are state of Wisconsin Rural Development staff members that were hired by Rural Development. They will be meeting with these collective counties to talk about what needs there are. So on the backside at the federal level, where this is of significance, is on the backside at the federal level, there are 18 different federal agencies that are part of this Rural Partners Network. Those agencies are looking to the community networks to have them identify public facility improvements, broadband improvements, housing improvements, childcare improvements, a long list of issues that we all confront, to see how the federal government can provide direct assistance to these communities. So in doing so, they can provide not necessarily boots on the ground. They're not going to help write an application, but they can help provide assistance to the community network and the communities they're in to give them some guideposts on seeking and looking for different funding opportunities that maybe some people aren't aware of. One of the things that the Rural Partners Network nationally asked for was a significant project, or pardon me, a signature project. That signature project for our network was a public facilities wastewater need in the Glidden area. So the Glidden Sanitary District has some significant issues related to their capacities and age of structure, and are going to be in need of funds. So that signature project was submitted to the 18 agencies to review and provide comment back to us on what potential funding opportunities are, or things that the federal government at the state level and or at the national level particularly could provide assistance in. That signature project was submitted at the end of March. We received an update earlier this week saying that the federal agencies reviewed the information. Their team internally at the DC level is reviewing that and will be providing information back to the community network here in the future. So we see this community network as being a very beneficial tool for the communities that are within those 3 counties. We're just starting this process. We will be looking to try to expand that community network. again, as I said, Dan represents Ashland County on that work group committee. We do have if you're interested, see me after the meeting. Well, I'll probably be gone before the meeting's over, but Dan could give you my contact information, or I could try to leave some business cards here. But we're having a reoccurring once a month meeting, the first Monday of every month, from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock is what it's scheduled for time wise. And just to talk about things that are happening in the 3 counties, and the staff from rural development will be on those calls to kind of give us updates what's happening at the national level, at the state level as well. So you're welcome to attend and learn more about what's happening in some of the jurisdictions that you represent as a county board member. So that's that. I'd be remiss.
So 3 counties signed on it. In Ashland County, half the population lives in the city of Ashland. So, and sometimes when we talk about stuff, we say, oh, this is a county thing, this is a city thing, and it seems like there's some overlap in some. Can you give us some sense of how this partnership would be helpful for projects within the city limits?
Yes, it's hard. The community network, the Rural Partners Network, is targeted to rural America, for those communities that were invited to apply. So Ashland is just as rural of the city. It's still within a rural county. So it would apply to any kind of projects that would be deemed eligible through the program for the city of Ashland as well. So it certainly would be a benefit to the city if they had projects, or if they had significant needs for infrastructure or other, to be a potential project. And the beauty about this program is that if there is a warranted project that needs to be looked at or could really use some federal assistance, there's a portal that we can access to submit these projects whenever. We don't have to wait for the feds to say, all right, give us your next signature project. We can submit projects of interest that have significant needs through the Rural Partners Network at any point in time. And those staff that rural development has will work with those communities that are advancing potential projects or ideas for funding to look at opportunities. So it's just, I think what I'm trying to say to your question is that the community network represents all of Ashland County. So if there are projects in the city or in any of the villages or in any of the towns, they're all eligible to access this program and be part of the program, for sure. I was just going to say one thing to the bounce back program. I know that's over. There's no funds available in that capacity, but I know we did rely much on Mary McFetrick from the chamber and Carver from AADC as it relates to vetting some of the applications that were received from businesses that were trying to access that $10,000 for startups during that COVID program. COVID funded program for $10,000 for businesses that were starting up or expanding. So just want to note that and thank them all for their help in that capacity. All right, so those are the 3 components. Finally getting to the end, and hopefully I didn't take up too much time, but housing, environmental services, and planning are the 3 sections that we have in the office, in addition to economic development. And I know that's what I'm listed on the conversation, but they all tie together as it relates to economic development within the community. You can't just do economic development by giving out money. There's a lot more that goes into that. So on our economic development side, we have a number of different revolving loan funds that are available to businesses for through our SBA microloan program, or some of our other state and federal funded revolving loan funds that we have for businesses that are looking to start up, purchase new equipment, hire new staff, need operating assistance. So we've got loan programs that are available in that capacity. Some of you may know Rick Rozier and or Ken Pearson. There are 2 boots on the ground that do all of our economic development efforts as it relates to financing and business assistance, particularly in our SBA program. Businesses that have received SBA microloans between $10,000 to $50,000 loans are eligible to receive free technical assistance as it relates to business financing, business planning within their capacities at their business. So we've got that tool as well. In addition to that, the Planning Commission is an economic development district. designated by the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration. So we receive some planning funds from the feds to do a comprehensive economic development strategy. One of our staff, Crystal Rohde, works on that, and that's a guidepost that we use for economic development in the region. So in that document that's available on our website, you can find all of the targeted economic development points that we're looking to address within the region, and encouraging communities to look at economic development funding through EDA. So for example, I know there's been some conversation across a couple of tribal nations just recently looking at an incubator workforce development site, trying to access some federal funds to develop those. We've helped communities develop industrial parks. Their industrial park is full. They need to put in new public facilities, streets, sewer, curb gutter, water. And the federal government through EDA can help fund some of those activities. So we work in that capacity as well. Not a Northwest Regional Planning Commission entity, but Wisconsin Business Innovation Corporation has created an entity called Visions Northwest. Visions Northwest is a redo. So that's kind of where I tied back to that, the Regional Economic Development Organization, as part of that broadband conversation I had. So Visions Northwest represents the 10-county area, the 10-county region, as a regional economic development organization. Where our key partner is the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, so WEDC. They provide funding assistance to Visions Northwest to provide outreach and coordination with economic development programs. The board of directors of Visions Northwest is made up of a diverse group of economic development and community members. Carver sits on the Visions Northwest group representing the economic development organizations within the communities. There is an open spot for Ashland County, and Dan and Crystal could have a further conversation about maybe having an appointment from the county specifically to this group as well. That group has been going on now since 2012. And looks to coordinate and has quarterly meetings with its board of directors. They also serve as the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or the CEDS, planning group. So they meet annually to look at the goals and objectives as it relates to the vision for economic development within the document across the state. So that's a lot of stuff. I just spoke to you in about 15-20 minutes on, but there's a lot of things that are happening at the Regional Planning Commission level that are specific to individual communities, obviously, or the counties. But I'm certainly happy to talk to you all about what economic development questions you have, maybe more specifically of me, or how we can maybe be more tied in with some of the conversations that you're all having at the county level or the local level in your area.
I was just down to Verona last week, and it really struck me how much high density housing they have there versus individual homes. It's just amazing. In fact, there's so little individual homes versus the high density housing. So then I come back up in this neck of the woods, and you step back into Ashland, and it's you look at it kind of fresh, and you say, my goodness, there's hardly any high density housing here. So everywhere we look, pretty much across the nation, lack of housing impedes economic development. So housing makes sense to be front and center. When they're developing down, on the other end of the state, a lot of it's high density housing because it brings a cost per unit to a lower price point than otherwise. I know from the city's comprehensive plan, they'd like to bring more people to the downtown for a variety of reasons, including it's less cost for water and sewer and roads by having higher density next to existing roads, water and sewer versus by, expanding out and developing more houses and all of that. My impression is, as a city and probably as a county, we seem to struggle to pull a project together like, let's have some high density housing. It takes some land, it takes a developer, it takes some financing. You have to work through the political process. In the time I've lived in Ashland, and I grew up out by Mason, So, I'm familiar with this my whole life. But, Ashland used to focus on Main Street as a whole, meaning the west side of Ellis and the east side. Well, the east side of Ellis is now largely, well, I don't want to say ignored, but it certainly gets less attention than the west side, which is the core of the downtown. So on the one hand, I understand that decision. The east side certainly has opportunity for development, including, I think there's places where high density housing could go. There's some amenities out there. There's a park, there's, some places to eat, and there's a bit of retail. So if someone wanted to put high density housing in somewhere out on the east end, like along Main Street, couple it with some retail, people talk about that, but we don't seem to get off the dime on doing that. And I don't understand what we're missing or what we need to do. And is this something that you could provide guidance on, grant writing on, expertise, help to understand us, what's possible and maybe what isn't possible given, all things, so that we can work our way through questions and issues and obstacles and, make some changes to, our lack of, I think some high density housing is really appropriate for some reasons, but we just don't seem to get there on that.
Yeah, I mean, we could provide some assistance. We're not, when it comes to particularly the WHEDA with an H, the Wisconsin Housing Economic Development Authority, their funding mechanisms and their programs. We don't have the staff that could write a significant grant as that is. And unfortunately, although the city did receive some, or not the city, but the developer in the city received funding from WHEDA for the project that's happening in the community currently. But those funds are really difficult to get because of the scoring mechanisms and because of the way they're set up. And because of where we are geographically, we just don't have those construction companies that are close enough in proximity to develop a number of them to make it even more cost competitive for them to develop a 50 unit in one community and just not too far away, build another one to have that cost savings. So they're hard to reach and grab. It's very fortunate that the application that was submitted a few years ago was funded for the community to move forward with. We could provide some guidance. We would not be able to provide any grant specific writing assistance for those kinds of grants. They're very particular.
So for developers, I think about Duluth and the high density housing that they have added. You think if we reached out to the city of Duluth, they could give us some contacts on developers that might be interested in taking a look over here? And would this be close enough and maybe of interest to some of them?
Yeah, I would say before you jump to Duluth, just stay in Superior. If you haven't been to Superior
I have,
lately, I mean, they've got multi-unit.
Well, twin ports, I'll say.
Yeah,
twin
okay.
ports.
Jim Caesar. So
Okay.
Jim Caesar's the Economic Development Director for the Douglas Development Association, it's called.
Okay.
Would be the guru to talk to as it relates to how the city of Superior has been able to attract all of these 5-story buildings that have multiple different levels of apartment complexes within it. Some of them are targeted specifically to workforce housing. They're all a mix, right? But some of the more recent projects that the city of Superior has seen developers come in, they are specifically market rent. And we're talking $1,000 to $2,000 a month. So there's that venue, and then there's also the WHEDA programs that provide market rate and workforce housing.
So where the Baptist church used to be up by the high school, that burned a few years back, and someone built housing there, and that's market rate, and at those prices are a bit more now, but that sure filled up fast. So I think it demonstrates some demand. And then I guess one more question. A day or two ago, WPR had a news story on that the legislature is considering no interest loans for housing, for workforce housing and seniors. I'm guessing that you followed that, and do you think there's an opportunity for us here if we can pull things together and use access to those loans for some high density housing?
Yes. Yeah. I've been following that legislation as well. And I believe everybody in the state is going to be chomping at that, and it's going to be gone in a heartbeat. Because it's definitely not enough to cover the need that's out there statewide, but there is opportunity for Ashland County and the communities to access those funds if they're made available. So, you know, as it relates to new development, so the regional pool of funds for housing rehab that we administer and the funds within the city of Ashland that we administer as well, those funds cannot be used for new construction. Now, however, just recently last year, we did help a client in the city of Ashland tear down their home because it was deemed unlivable and put in a new manufactured home. So we can do manufactured home replacements, not new, not necessarily. We can't serve a client who has a vacant piece of land and wants to put a manufactured home. We can't do that, but we could tear a house down, put a new home on it through that program. Additionally, the CDBG program can help landlords improve rental units. And if there was a business downtown that had a second floor that maybe they wanted to break up into apartment units, these funds could be used for that too as well. That's probably one thing that most people aren't aware of, that these funds could be used for assisting in upper level conversion of office space to an apartment building.
So you said those funds, if this is approved by the legislature, will probably be gone fast. So I'm guessing there's some criteria that's set, and if you meet it, are they going to say, yep, okay, here are the funds, and when it's gone, it's gone? Or is there going to be a deadline and everybody consider? And the reason I'm asking this is, if that looks like a program that would be of interest to folks in this neck of the woods, should we be on this ASAP and get things in the moment we can for all practical purposes? Or are we going to have a window of time to apply and then be considered with everybody that applies?
There will be a window of time in which to apply. While the legislation identifies funding available for 0% loans and redoing second and third floor places for residential, there's still got to be the development of the guide on how you access those funds. So while the legislation is still fresh and being proposed and running through committees, I wouldn't expect to see that anytime by the end of the year. Once, if the legislation is approved through the legislature and then approved by the governor, it's probably going to be another 6 months at least before some funds are even available for that. But it's certainly something we want to monitor and keep our eyes on. And we are doing that in the office for sure.
But it would be good for us to follow it,
Yep.
and to the extent that we can start pulling together some possibilities that are as close to shovel ready or rehab ready as possible.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, most certainly. You definitely want to be proactive.
A few years ago, we did a joint assessment of our housing opportunities between Ashland and Bayfield County to try to pull in. You guys helped us with that, right? Okay. Do you think that's still pertinent? Because I think it was we started that during the beginning of COVID, wasn't it? Has housing changed that much up here, or has it gotten more demand?
I would say nothing has changed significantly from COVID to now. There's still, you all read the papers, see the news, or have friends that are trying to find a home to move here. The housing stock's just not available in some places. I know the WIDA project, the pilot project, the Schwalming Bay pilot project that Bayfield and Ashland were part of, has almost concluded. They've got 3 pilot ideas that are being proposed. So they're still working on pitching the information to WIDA, but it's wrapping up. But there's still that need. There's still that dynamic need for housing of all levels for all people in both counties.
Okay.
Yeah, that hasn't changed.
Well, at least we have something ahead of time.
Question about the bounce back grant. You said that ended, but there was some money available?
No, there's no money available for the bounce back program. It concluded at the end of December. The governor did include another $500 million in his proposed budget, but the legislature has removed that from their budget plan that they're working on. So there is no more bounce back left.
Blake, go ahead.
I was, oh, shoot. I was asked as a community member to be part of trying to bring a pool to the Ashland area. It's a very it's an onion that keeps getting more and more complex. But as I hear you talk about this community network, it feels like, how would an application even, would it come through Dan to get to that? Or how would we even know about this until this point in meeting today? How would that get pushed out to the community awareness? And then what would be someone that would be able to apply for that?
Right, so Dan would be a good resource to bring that information to. We do plan, the group, the community network group, has only been in existence for a handful of months. So we haven't done a big push or splash. We were really waiting for rural development to hire their staff on the ground to really help provide more guidance and support for this process. This is a process that we're engaged in that doesn't have any money that's helping our communities move this project forward. This is all just Dan's time, my time process. So what I would suggest is just do a write-up of what your need is for that project. Right now, there's not an application per se to submit for funding assistance. But if it's a project that the community desires and would like to try to push forward, we could take that and submit it to the Rural Partners Network at the national level and see what opportunities there might be at the federal level for something like that. That's where we see things moving forward at this point in time. A great question.
I have a board member of mine, Gary Mertig. He represents down by Glidden and Butternut. And can those, what? I see him right there, yeah. And that's why I'm reaching out to him on those two communities looking to do projects. Do they need to collaborate or coordinate with Dan to access Northwest Regional, or can they direct aid and assistance from you guys direct from their community? Right.
They could do both. They could reach out to me or Dan. I know Ryan Tim from the Glidden Area Economic Development Group is part of the community network, the
Okay.
Northern Wisconsin Community Network. So he's on all of our meetings and providing guidance and assistance from
Okay.
the area that he represents down in Glidden area as well. But anybody can reach out to us, and as I said, they can jump on our monthly meetings moving forward for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So they also have access to AADC, right, Carver?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Carver and his staff also sit on the community network meetings that we have as well.
Mhm.
Yep.
I should probably get hooked onto that because
Yeah.
I'm getting more involved these days.
Okay,
So sure.
I'll send.
Appreciate it.
Anybody who's interested, let me know and I'll email you the Zoom link.
Pat?
So I'm happy to hear that Glenn's going to hopefully get some help with their sewer system down there. And, but I'm compelled to ask about, has the city of Ashland asked about maybe expanding their capacity? Because we have a history of overflows. The city's been trying to solve that by reducing the inflow and infiltration problems, which makes sense. And, but whether that's a long-term solution or not, but have they contacted you? And is it maybe worth them looking at adding capacity if they're having interest?
They haven't contacted me directly. Their administrative staff is aware of the community network, and it's starting in its beginnings. But we haven't seen any applications come from anybody. In fact, we really haven't solicited anybody for applications yet. And again, it's in part because we were waiting for the rural development staff to come on board. So that just happened, as I said, just in the last month in April. So we expect that there'll be much more information moving forward to units of governments that will allow them to be more fully aware of this community network and potentially move forward projects of interest.
Okay.
Yep.
With that, Dan,
Sheldon, is there any money available, I guess, along the lines of a speculative grant? What I had in mind is the ORDOC development thing, and we, no matter what we do to the ORDOC, if we don't provide a facility, parking facility and an onshore like a little community center or something, If we don't have something like that in place, if we should ever get that ship in here or the center, that's a need. People don't want to go to the ORDOC now and walk 2 blocks to get to it. So we can't have anything going on down there. Like Bay Days or whatever, which would be a perfect place for it with parking. Is there any money available for doing something like that or no?
I am not aware of anything that would stick out to me right now. And I know that that development area has been under consideration through your participation in Superior Days in the past and other efforts of the community with the legislator to try to find funds. I suspect because there hasn't been any funds available to date that you've been able to access, they're very limited for that specific purpose. But in a broader scope, there may be opportunities down the road, and this community network may be one of those avenues to look at a potential funding source using the federal partners that are in DC that are part of the Rural Partners Network. So that's an opportunity that we could explore with them to see what opportunities might lay at the federal level for a project.
Yeah, I don't know what the process is, if you would have to have a commitment or even construction starting on the science center and then build a parking lot, or if you can build a parking lot first for speculative things like that. I don't know what the process is.
I don't either, but it's an opportunity to look at. I know like with EDA, economic development, public projects, in order to put in a industrial park, you need to have a business that has a letter saying that, yes, if you build it, we will come. So that's an EDA project for industrial park expansions, but maybe it would be similar to that if you had somebody saying that, yes, if you do this, we will come, that might make funds more accessible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
If Sheldon's done, is it okay if I ask Carver to add a little bit here? Or is that just, there's a project that, he's got this money that he's been doing. I know we've gone over here, but I just would like an update because there's been quite a bit going on.
Well, Dan's checking the agenda, and I can maybe take 30 seconds to say thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
So if the committee's okay, is Carver can talk also?
I'm fine with including Carver, but I had one more question I wanted to ask Sheldon, if he's going to escape on us. Grant writing is something that comes up frequently, and everywhere I've worked that comes up. So sometimes people say hire a grant writer that serves the whole organization, which to some extent means they kind of need expertise on everything. And then some people will say, well, let's have the grant writing within each department. They can focus on their expertise because you also have to write reports. And then that means working with staff that are carrying out the tasks in that grant writing. We don't have a grant writer per se right now, but department heads write those, as needed and as they have time. So if we were considering trying to expand our grant writing in this county, do you have any words of advice for us based on your experiences with other counties and cities? What seems to work well when they try to increase the amount of grant writing they do? And then also the grant writing services you provide, do you ask that a county or a city very specifically say, I would like you to write a grant for, either this particular place like Wisconsin Coastal Management, or just grants in general, say for roads, or just keep your eye open for grants for anything that might be of helpful? So just any thoughts would be appreciated.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any county in our region that has a specific grant writer that's doing grant writing for the county. Tribal nations, they do have grant writers within their capacities that are doing grant writing specifically. We will write grants for projects internally if we have the capacity and the knowledge of the grant that's being requested. So just kind of back to the coastal management program. We also receive a coastal management planning grant from the state. So if you were to apply, if you were to want to put an application into that program, we would write that for you at no cost. So we do those. We did that for Bayfield County. We've done it for other communities along the shore. It's a hard one to answer specifically because some of the grants that you might want to look for are very, very specific, and you're better to find a consultant or grant writer that has knowledge in that program in order to do so. So I wouldn't say don't look for a grant writer that could serve in your capacities, but then it depends also too what your future plans are for grant needs. You know, if you're going to hire somebody to write grants, what are your needs in the next 3 to 5 years to really hire somebody to do that full time all the time, to make it beneficial and make it worth the program, the investment, I should say. So that would be my suggestions, but you know, just trying to find those consultants that are experienced in those specific grants that they're seeking is the best way to go.
You want to go Carver to say?
I'll make a motion to add Carver to the
we don't
discussion.
need a
No,
motion.
no motion? Yeah.
So Carver, come on. Grab a mic.
I would like to point out Carver is going to be at the exec committee meeting next month also, which is June 13th, I believe. So.
Okay.
And then we're going to ask Mary.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Okay, do you want me to limit my time here? 5 minutes? I can do that in 5 minutes. Carver Harries, Executive Director of Ashland Area Development Corporation. Supervisor Ellefson called me late yesterday and asked if I could come. I'd like to talk just about some of the bigger things that are going on in the county right now to make sure that this committee has some awareness of some of the exciting things that are happening. Lots of entrepreneur activity happening right now in the city of Ashland, in Glidden, primarily. Those are the two places where I'm seeing it. Of course, Sheldon was talking about one of our community programs going on. There's other community things going on. So for instance, Mellon and Morris, they applied for a program called Community Economic Analysis for Rural Wisconsin Communities Pilot Initiative. And they were approved for that program. What they now have is the opportunity to develop an economic development strategy just for Mellon and Morris. They have a group of individuals that are meeting at least on a monthly basis to develop their strategy. They have until June of 2024 to do so. And of course, Sheldon, my colleague here, talked about the Northern Wisconsin Community Network, which has a lot of potential for going to doing great things in Ashland County. I'd like to talk a little bit about the entrepreneur activity in Glidden. There's an entrepreneur there. Her name is Lena Matola. She had purchased the bar and grill there. It's called Lena's Bar and Grill at this point in time. And she's been doing some really wonderful things down there. If you don't know where this is located, if you know where Northern State Bank is on the side street in Glidden, it's right next door to that. Okay, so she is prepared to invest in some major private projects. One of them will be constructing a brand new building next to Lena's Bar and Grill that will contain a restaurant, a bakery, and have 5 to 6 apartments upstairs, which is a pretty significant investment. She also purchased the property across the street from Lena's Bar and Grill, raised the building there, and is going to be constructing a fairly significant inn there. I think it's going to be called Matola's Inn. And that will primarily serve weekend recreationalists. I'm working with her on her business plan. I just spoke with her this morning to get permission to talk with you all about what she's got planned there. But she is seeing a kind of a fresh start in people moving into the Glidden area. So there's going to be a need for more housing. She's very concerned about the infrastructure there because she knows the condition of the infrastructure there and she's seen people move in. And of course, she's investing a lot of money into that community. I think Glidden's going to look a lot different 5 years from now than it does now. Okay, I'm going to talk about fund diversity. I believe I've mentioned this to the county board before. This is $1,887,223 that we received primarily to help entrepreneurs that are from diverse communities in Ashland County that historically have not had access to capital in order to start or to expand their businesses. So far, ADC has awarded 4 grants for a total of $328,000. I get about average of $400,000 every 6 months. And the entrepreneurs that engage in this program, I've got 42 signed up right now throughout Ashland County. They work with me on their business plan, getting their pro formas, getting all their paperwork ready before it goes before my review committee and then to the AADC board. I'm averaging about 2 applicants a month, one to 2 applicants a month. So we're right on track for making sure that all that money is spent by December of 2024 when that grant program ends. In fact, one of those grants was given to an entrepreneur on Madeline Island who is going to be turning their convenience store, it's like a convenience store grocer, but it's more a convenience store, into more of a grocery store on the island to serve the community of La Pointe. So that's pretty exciting. Lots of activity going on. I don't have enough time to keep up with the phone calls that I'm getting, both from entrepreneurs here and people that are looking to move up to this area. And we also need to start thinking about how climate migration is going to be affecting our region as families and businesses that are in more of the drought-stricken areas of the United States are looking at pulling up stakes and moving to the water-rich areas of the country. So that's a long-range forecast. And I'm certainly not an analyst in that area, but I feel like we need to get ahead of that too. That's 5 minutes, I'm sure. Any questions? Exactly. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I would like to say, if you guys have questions for Carver, he's going to be at the June, like I said, the June exec committee meeting. If you can't make it, you can funnel the questions to me and I will get them to Carver so he can prepare for your answers. And then obviously we'll get an email back or something from him.
I'd like to extend a thank you for your time, Sheldon, and perhaps we may call on you again in the future.
Yes, thank you very
No problem.
much. Appreciate it. I'm going to sit through your housing discussion and then I do need to get going back to the office. So again, thank you for your time. And I'm happy to come up whenever you call.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll move it on to the information only here with our housing update. And very shortly here, I'll be leaving the meeting here for a short time. I need to exit stage right for 5 or 10 minutes and I'll return. So housing,
Okay, Supervisor Kinney asked for this to be on the agenda, and I know he's already started talking about housing in the last item agenda, but I think we want to talk in general, how are we gonna get more housing here? I do know that the project, which is what, 50 units, is being constructed right now out behind the Quick Trip next to Walmart. And I know that there are schedules for additional units there. This is just the first 50. They are planning on putting more units there later when the funding comes in. The city's also identified properties that they would like to see housing development go on. And so they've put offers out. They've asked developers to put in offers for that. There's also, as Supervisor Kinney mentioned earlier, The state is looking at putting up to $1 billion into housing from the surplus. Our two legislators are actually behind the effort. So Senator Quinn and Representative Green are actually on the forefront of this effort. They both realize that housing can't just focus on the city. It also we have to look at Glidden and Mellon and Butternut too, because those areas are in desperate need of housing, especially senior housing. So I don't know how you guys would like to take this conversation or what you would like to say, but that's sort of where we're at. I just want to say it's difficult to get housing here. Single family homes are $200 a square foot to construct, at least. So you're looking at a 1,500 square foot home is $300,000. A 2,000 square foot home is $400,000, and that's just minimum. That's not counting if you want to upgrade put your better knobs on and better faucets and better all that stuff. If you want to upgrade the shingles to something that's more durable, we're talking base costs there. So housing is difficult, and I'm not sure interest rates are going to help that either. So
I guess at the county level, what are some of the tools that we can use? Because, like the city, it feels like they can use some tax incentive financing.
Mhm.
So I guess what are some of the tools other than, I mean, just us talking about it is kind of difficult, but like
Right.
the developer side of it. And, when you talk about the city of Ashland looking at properties, are they putting it out with that TIF financing or is it not?
No. All right. So TIF district tax incremental finance districts are restricted to cities. Counties don't have the ability to do a TIF district. We sit on the oversight board because we're one of the taxing entities, and so does the school district and so does the tech school. But we don't have the ability to form our own TIF districts. Only municipalities can, or cities and villages. Towns need special permission from the state legislature most of the time. So that's why we talk about the city, because they actually have they have the ability to do that. However, that investment is limited to a geographic area that's identified by the city previously. So the only geographic areas that we have available right now for a TIF are the downtown district, which is something the city would be looking for at the 514 building for the second and third floor. So I wrote that down, Sheldon, to talk to you about that. And then they have the industrial park area. Although I'm not sure if that's designated as a mixed use TIF. That might be business only. Mixed use TIF is when the city creates a TIF, they can put housing and commercial in there. The housing limit is usually around 25% of the whole value of it. So that makes it difficult. One of the things I've talked to Senator Quinn and Representative Green about is raising that number. That if you're really invested in housing, you need to allow municipalities to have a greater percentage of their TIF with housing, or you have to let them open specific housing TIFs. And that may be one of the solutions that comes up in the fall session of the legislature. They're not going to do any of this attached to the budget. So it would come up in the fall after the summer break. What we as counties we are very limited in that. We can't do much. We can be they can bring information here. We can help notify them when there are grant opportunities. We can work with them, but we really don't have any statutory powers to do housing, at least right now. We had the ability to use some of our remaining ARPA funds to put towards a housing project if one comes up, and we could certainly use our budget process to fund projects, but that's difficult for our county at least. So that's really where our limitations are. We can fund projects, but that's it. But in that, I think it's good talking about this because it's getting the municipalities to think about this. That's the other thing. We have that ability to try to get them to move and think about things to hook them up with people like Carver and Sheldon. And say they, there are these programs out there that can help you.
So Laura, your vice chair, are you running the meeting in the interim?
I was actually waiting to try to go to the bathroom also. But yes.
All right.
If you want to be recognized, go ahead.
So good question on tools. So the city, if they created a TIF district in the east end, in particular, there's space to develop it, it needs redevelopment. So a mixed use with, say retail on the first floor, housing above that. If the city is willing to do that, and back to the USDA programs, is there anything that the county could then apply for and contribute to work in partnership with the city to pull this together, instead of having the city and the county each saying, well, we're limited in what we can do, which I get, but are there things that we can do together that you would suggest that we at least consider?
Well, if it was a joint project between the county and the city, just hypothetically, I mean, only one lead applicant is going to be able to get funding. They're both individually not going to get double up dollars for the project, obviously. But there's opportunities for those conversations and discussions for sure. I don't know if there's any rural development funds that are available for that specific task. And not to go too deep in the woods for TID districts, but it's 25% of, it's either unplatted lands or it's very restrictive. I mean, while it's available, it doesn't really serve the needs that the state has. So, as Dan mentioned, there's hopefully some legislation that will change that TID district from 25% to something much, much greater. That would be more beneficial. But then it is very restrictive currently for just cities and villages to be able to tap into those residential TIDs or tax and finance districts. Maybe the legislation they're proposing will expand it broader for town level tax and districts, but right now that's really limited.
So you mentioned Jim Caesar up in Douglas County. Do you have a sense of how much high density housing he's putting up for workforce development and seniors versus condos for people with more bucks that come up and spend some time when the weather's nice, whatever that means to them?
I don't know the breakdown specifically, but I do know that they have just recently completed an apartment complex. Pretty sure it's 50 units or more. That's all market rate. There's no, that specific unit was not inclusive of more workforce housing type, complementary combination of both. He probably would know that information, but it's just amazing how much apartment complex development work is going on up there right now.
In Ashland, we all know this, there's some really crappy places to live, and whoever owns them, and like a third of the city of Ashland, I think, is rental, or maybe it's more now. Even some really dumpy places that most of us wouldn't want to live, they're still paying awfully good money. And I think that's why that housing development where the Baptist church used to be up by the high school, why that filled up so fast, because you're paying initially about the same money there as a dumpy place, and now a little bit more than a dumpy place. So I suspect that some new housing that's fit to live in would fill up fast.
And I'll just say as well, on the landlord side, the programs that the city of Ashland has and the regional program has, if you're a landlord and you're on the call or you're in this room and you have units you want to rehab and they're occupied by low to moderate income households, which is 80% or below county median income, I have 0% financing available for you for those remodels or shouldn't say remodels, those rehabilitation in those units. So you're not going to find 0% financing really anywhere other than through these two programs.
Yeah, I have that in my notes, and boy, I sure hope we have some landlords that would look at it. And the other thing, just as an observation from walking through the neighborhood and stuff, I see more and more people working on rehabbing houses that are, reached the point where somebody's got to put some money into it. More and more trucks and trailers from contractors who are not from this immediate area, which would suggest to me we've got more and more people investing in buying the property here from outside the area, and they're rehabbing them, as rentals to make money off of, which I understand. But I don't think it's our locals as doing the same percent of this rehab and ownership. And so part of my concern with that is, and maybe my core concern is, I suspect we're getting more and more absentee landowners, which in general becomes problematic for a lot of reasons in terms of taking care of things and being responsive. And I know the city of Ashland, when I was on the city council, this is, we're pushing 10 years, I think, where, some of these landlords, you couldn't get a hold of them because they would just have, a PO box. There was no phone number, there was no email. And so part of the issue became when there's problems, we can't even get a hold of somebody. And so they changed the ordinance. We had to change the ordinance that said, we have to have some contact information when problems occur. We've got to be able to get a hold of someone. And this was our absentee landlords, but it was also some of our locals. And so, if the locals were redeveloping, at least that's labor and jobs here and hopefully money spent here. But when the outsiders come in, that's even more money that leaves our community because they're bringing in outside labor and resources. They show up with materials from somewhere else and they're not even, a local guy usually buys stuff here, but I see people bringing in the trailers from somewhere else. So the rebuilding, to me, we have houses that could go.
In any of that funding, is there clauses that it has to be rented a certain percentage? Because my worry, because I've seen some nice houses get sold, is that they're going to use them for Airbnbs, because I do have one back behind my house that you have a hard time getting a hold of somebody to deal with the people that end up inside of there. And it seems like that is the trend, especially because we have beauty and fishing and things like that. So
Yeah, to try to address that question, I'll be very brief. On the owner occupied rehabilitation, those program funds are 0% loans and they're deferred loans. So if you're eligible for that, you meet the income qualifications and all the other requirements of the program, you can rehabilitate your home. And then those loans are not due until you sell the house in the future. So they stay at 0%. What it is today is what you're going to pay back whenever you sell a house or whenever you sell a house. On the landlord side, the landlord doesn't have to be income eligible. It's the tenants within the home the rental unit have to be eligible. So all the applicants, all the tenants who are in their unit have to put an application in. 51% or more have to be low to moderate income. And then that's a 0% deferred pay. That's a 0% loan. And we can structure these loans. It used to be set up on a 10-year basis. We can structure them longer now to accommodate their cash flow. And they are restricted based on the federal rent limits. So when they change, and again, it's based on the number of bedrooms in each unit or in the apartment. That's what the base rent is. So that changes every year. So just as an example, if we had a 10-year loan with a landlord, we have to verify the residency in the first 5 years of that 10-year loan. So if it was 20-year loan, we have to do it for 10 years. And in that first 5 years, they have to guarantee that they will not raise the rent more than the rent limit that the federal government establishes. But after 5 years, they can incrementally do whatever they want to. So there are some claw-in things that make it available to low to moderate income for those first half of the years of the loan on purpose. But then after that, they have the flexibility to raise rents to whatever they would want. But it's a great program, but unfortunately, we just don't get a lot of landlords accessing it.
it's like the old weed up programs, it sounds like.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right, looks like we can move on to the financial consultants update.
Okay, Steve is here. I handed out some numbers earlier today. Steve sent me those this morning. They will get on the county website, on the packet when Heather gets back tomorrow.
So Dan, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
I just have
Okay.
one question first. Was Mike coming back?
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't mind if we take like a 5-minute break, because it looks like I have to run downstairs.
No problem.
Thank you.
Lori, can you pause the recording, please? Lori, can you please start the
Thank you, Lori. I forgot where we are. It was urgent. I
Steve,
was
you're
like,
up.
Mike and Steve, you're on.
All right, thank you very much. Mike unfortunately had a commitment today, so he's not going to be here with you. It's just me. And that's the benefit of having a partner. Next month, I'm actually going to be gone, so Mike will cover for me. So it works out well. So good morning, everyone. So the first thing I did is I put up your April kind of budget summary here to look at. Really not a whole lot going on that of note. I did, go through in detail with Sue on a couple issues, and so we are monitoring things. Just kind of watching where receipts get posted, where things are charged to make sure that we're putting things in the correct places. I think probably the only thing of note where you're over budget, which you probably know about, and when I say over budget, it's relatively small in your overall county budget. It's roughly about 20,000 right now, is in the Corp Council area with some of the issues you're involved with Sanborn, LaPointe, some employment matters, things of that nature. That budget, is over budget. But again, it's only a small part of the overall county budget. So, but it will be monitored, and we will certainly follow that and report on that specifically. So as we kind of go through here, and I know it was requested that, so I'm going to try to point to stuff here. There really isn't a whole lot on the revenue side. To kind of go over. Things are as they should be for this time of year. This is a report through April, so roughly 33.33% through the year. Not all revenues come in at that rate, so it's not unusual that some are lower. General fund has shared revenues in it, which won't come in 15% until July. It'll come in, and then 85% in November. Human services now is starting to show some activity from closing out 2022, and then now starting to receive reimbursements, et cetera, for 2023 activities. So I don't know that there's anything specifically. Revenue side certainly would answer any questions. I should point out, while it is an April 30th report, I did note the County Road and Bridges Fund had not been billed for the April work yet. So that is something, we'll work on with departmental personnel to make sure that things are kind of closed out by the time your meeting happens, so that, we can have up-to-date data. So I don't have to tell you that this is only through March when it's an April report, so to speak. Let's see, on the expense side, I think things are tracking very well. Again, the only thing I saw in the general fund was with the Corp Council expenses, which certainly, you're defending yourself and standing up for what you believe is correct, and we would support that absolutely. Nothing really here to point out either. It's still April, so not a lot going on. Wages look right. You don't see wages here, but in the detailed reports, we can see, that things are tracking according to the budget. And if it's okay, because I see the 2024 budget discussion is also on, I'll maybe dovetail a couple items into that. So as part of the 2024 budget prep, we'll be assisting, providing, I guess you approve our contract. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But assisting the county with doing a wage worksheet that would list every position in the county and the forecasted wage for that position according to the new pay compensation plan that the county's adopted, along with the associated fringe benefits that the person in the position would be earning as they worked throughout the year. And then that will be keyed into the budget. So That'll be done by the clerk's office. So individual departments won't be keying that in. Although we will ask them to verify it and validate what we have done. Part of this is done to just make sure that we have like position control, like if the sheriff's department is supposed to have 20 deputies, that there isn't 21 and there's not 19, there's 20. Things like that, so that you're not over budgeting, you're not under budgeting. So that's the purpose for that. So I just had to dovetail that in because it kind of went in with this discussion here too. The other thing I would point out is, I think on our last report, there were no, I'm going to back up just a little bit here to this jail assessment money. There was something that was misposted that Sue and I had noticed that we did redistribute. So now that does show up here. And that's not uncommon. Things can happen like that. But that's why, you know, somebody should be reviewing this, which we do and Sue will do, and monitor it so that we kind of catch things before we get too far through the year. I don't know, are there any specific questions or things that you expected to hear with regards to anything that departments have been doing that you're aware of that you'd like more information on? I'd certainly be willing to answer any questions you have.
The sheet that you're showing us has some places where there are dashes as opposed to numbers. So my first question is, why are there dashes in places? And then in some of those places, you know, for example, on the inmate wellness line, there are 2 dashes, and then there's an actual year-to-date at 372, but it shows a 0% there. And if you have dashes in a line, how can you compute a percent of 0%? Seems to me some of those percents should be just dashes as opposed to 0%.
Yeah, you're probably correct, Pat. I mean, we had formulas in there, and of course in Excel, it'll come up with like an error because there is no budget. The inmate wellness fund, which was newly created, I mean, that is something that I would anticipate we would budget for 2024. So, and I wanted to put that on here for a couple of reasons. Number one, it was a change in the way things were being handled, to have transparency to the sheriff and everybody involved with this, to show that when they turn the funds in, because they hadn't been turning it in before, that they are being tracked and they are available for the intended purpose. So that's the reason it's on there. I do understand what you're saying. How is 372 0%? Probably should just put a dash in there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because, you know, you look at the percents and you see 0%, and then you look back over for numbers and there's nothing there. The dash at least would tell me you didn't have all the numbers needed to compute that, as opposed to somehow you did have numbers and nothing has changed. Then at least we would know you didn't have all the numbers for some reason.
We'll change that format. Yeah.
Yeah, and me being a math person, you know.
Yep. No, I get it. And you know, the dashes up here just mean that there is no activity right now. So like in debt service, we didn't anticipate any revenues there per se. We budgeted for the levy. And so we're not expecting revenues to come in. Now, if they would, you know, they would show up here. But currently there are no revenues in either of these areas, the county improvement fund, the uniform allowance, other than the tax levy.
Yeah, my brain is programmed to grade the right column and I can't help it. So thank you.
Okay, we'll fix that. Other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, I can move on then to the, let's see, the budget, I think is next, correct? 2024? Yeah.
24.
Oh, and if I could, just before we get to there, financial consultants update, I should let you know what we've been working on. So we did the financial analysis here. But some of the things Mike and I have been working on to assist the county. So we've gotten the county and assisted with prepping for your audit, which is currently going on. Kerber Rose is there yesterday and today to do their field work. So Mike assisted with reconciling some tax accounts regarding delinquent taxes, tax deeds, things like that. That's all been done. Different things with regards to requests from the auditors for like debt service schedules, things like that, to kind of put that together. And then just overall support if they have a question. In addition, we did review the Form A, which is also referred to as your state financial report, to make sure that things are being reported appropriately and correctly. This is an area where Mike did notice a year or so ago that some things weren't being reported correctly in the highway area, which part of the purpose of this report is to assist the state to dole out shared revenues and state transportation aids. And I know the error that Mike found was causing the county to not to receive, I would estimate roughly about 30 to 50,000 per year transportation aids. So that is something that, you know, we'll continue to monitor to make sure things are correct. We did, you guys, I know, have discussed leasing vehicles with Enterprise Fleet Services. There was a question on that regarding, can lease payments be considered for the debt levy exemption under levy limits? I did submit a request to Department of Revenue to Sarah Regenauer, who is the director of the State Local Government Bureau, who regulates whether or not you can take a levy exception or not. We did get an affirmative on that these lease payments can be, as long as it says the county is pledging its full faith and credit. And, you know, so we did work with Dan to get a document kind of drafted so that the county can include this as part of the lease agreements, so that you can take a levy exemption for those payments for principal and interest going forward. We also did assist the county with filing their ARPA report for the ARPA funds. And let's see what else here. Oh, and then we've worked with Springbrook Processes to, I believe now the clerk's office is doing receipting. Human Services is doing cash receipting. We have a meeting set up next week to discuss. Human Services has a lot of ACH transactions from the state where they transmit state aids to the county. A lot of times there's confusion with that because they go directly to the treasurer, to the bank account. They don't know what they're for. So how do we record that? We have some ideas and we're going to discuss those next week so that those can be handled timely and get recorded so that it doesn't hold up anything in the treasurer's office as far as writing a receipt for that when they come in, the day they come in. The other areas with Springbrook are the usage of the accounts receivable module, which we certainly think we could use a little bit more in certain areas, and we will be working with departments to implement those. And then a bigger project that has been going on for a while, and I do have a commitment from the department to complete this by the end of June, but that is with regards to Human Services and their chart of accounts. Currently, Human Services has a separate accounting system for tracking expenses for reporting through the various reporting systems the state has for them to generate reimbursements back. So the detail is kept in that system versus in Springbrook. So in Springbrook, it's more summary form. There's a need to reconcile that. They spend significant time doing that. The system they use, I believe, is called WSIS, is currently unsupported. So if it were to die or crash, I mean, it could mean that you wouldn't be able to use that any longer. So we're in the process of redesigning the chart of accounts in Springbrook so that we can move away from reliance upon this unsupported system and have the detail in the county's Springbrook software application, which is supported. So the department has committed to blocking off the first 2 weeks of June and the last week of June to get this done. Now, in my opinion, it probably takes one day, but I asked them to block that off because I needed a commitment from them to ensure that we would get it done. One of the reasons that's important is Springbrook has said that they would assist in this process by uploading the chart of accounts that would be designed versus having employees key it in manually, which would take significant time. But we've been kind of asking them to do this for a while, and I believe this started like last November, and it just hasn't gotten to the goal line yet. And so I do have a commitment from them. I know Dan has relayed information through to the department too, that this is a priority. So we will carry that to the goal line and complete it by the end of June. Trying to think of what else we have here. I think that was about it. We did participate with and around accounting issues related to your joint dispatch discussions with Bayfield and Ashland counties. Nothing specific there other than to say that anything accounting related, it wouldn't be the first time counties joined together to do a joint operation. Everything can be handled. I think there's probably just more, we need to get further down the path of how it's going to look for us to really say, here's what we think it should be. But just to kind of give you reassurance, it's not going to be a deal breaker. It's going to be something that can be accomplished and would work well. So I think that is it on the financial consultants update. So then I'd ask if there are any questions before we move into the budget.
Go ahead, Pat.
On HHS, once you do this upgrade to Springbrook, what are the implications for the volume of records backed up both electronically and in paper? Because if that system crashes now, it would imply that you wouldn't, or perhaps not, have backup records either. And I'm asking that maybe in large part because space is tight. And I'm wondering if this will help us clean up papers and file cabinets.
Yeah, I think, I don't know what they're saving all their supporting documentation now to document things. And I believe you probably are keeping it for around 7 years is the requirement. In Springbrook, certain things can be uploaded into Springbrook and then you don't need to keep the paper copy. I would recommend you keep it through the audit in case the auditors want to look at it. But once you've gone through your audit process, you probably don't need to retain the paper because you'd have an electronic copy on the system. But there are some things in human services that have client names on them, that are confidential and can't be scanned. So there's probably still going to be a need for them to keep some of that stuff because you're subject to audit, for a period of time there that we just need to maintain that so that you could defend yourselves if somebody came in to audit you. But it should, to answer your question, Pat, I think it will cut down a little bit. I don't know if it's going to be, like significant, but it will cut down on that to a certain extent. And it will definitely cut down on the effort put forth by employees just to reconcile back and forth between the WSIS system and the Springbrook system and making sure things are tied out so that they balance. So that I see as being a big thing. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Are there other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. And then I think the budget discussion section here, number 9, I believe in your packet was a timeline. And to kind of just run through that a little bit. And I think, Dan, your intention would be to kind of speed up a couple of these a little bit more so next year so that due dates were maybe a little bit more earlier in the year. We started working on this March, April of this year. So we had to kind of tailor it to what was left in the year. So I think some of the things that you see might be moved up a little bit for 2025's budget. But departments should be asking for any new position requests or reclasses. You know, so that they could be dealt with in June, to give direction so that, you know, we could do that wage worksheet to include that in the budget. Dan has requested departments submit their capital improvement items for next year's budget, along with, you know, a 5-year plan so that you can see kind of what's projected. And then, you know, the review of that would come forth in June. Again, like in July here, and I don't know, do you have this document, or I don't know if I can pull it up from your site here and share it. I can
I can
stop.
if he stops the screen
Okay,
save.
there, I'll stop sharing that, Dan. If you want to put it up, that might help.
Yeah. So. Wait. Okay.
All right.
Share screen.
Perfect. All right, so we're kind of like in the month of July right now. It'd be where I would say we are. And if there are any questions, feel free to, I can't see it, but if you raise your hand or let Dan know or just jump in. So in July, we're anticipating that by the 7th of July, the clerk's office would prepare and distribute a payroll worksheet to departments. This would be the worksheet I'm talking about that would list every position in every department, calculate its associated fringe benefits. So FICA, Wisconsin retirement, workers' comp, health insurance, all of that sort of stuff that comes along with having a position. And then we would distribute those to departments so that they could review that and of course, look at it and validate it, what our assumptions were. And then we would key that into the budget. Again, there you're going along and reviewing the KIP that's being done and, you know, preliminarily set items to be included in the budget. July 24th, the clerk's office would distribute budget worksheets. One thing of note here is the county is in the process of acquiring a module, which is part of Springbrook that's called extended budgeting. The interesting thing with these is the modules included in your subscription. The training to like tell you how to use it is, you know, they're going to charge you a little bit for that. I've worked with Sue to minimize that. I think it's probably going to be, you know, a half a day or something like that at training, which isn't going to be probably even more than $500 to $800. And then what that will do is you will be able to take your chart of accounts in Springbrook and divide it up and say, these accounts are for the DA's office. These are for the clerk of court. These are human services. The veteran service office has these, zoning, so on and so forth. You'll take your chart and you'll put it into every department so that they have access to it. We will key in the wages and benefits. And then we'll be able to reconcile that within the whole budget. So we can tell that we keyed in the correct amount, that there's not more or less. Then departments will key in their requests for operating expenditures like travel, training, dues, registration, all that kind of stuff that, you know, goes along with running their department, including estimated actuals, which are where they expect 2023's budget to end up in December. So they're kind of forward forecasting, you know, what's going to happen in their budget. The benefit of this are a couple of things. It tells your administrator where the problem areas are in your budget or where the departments see problem areas can be, so that you can hopefully react to that and try to mitigate that. The other thing is there's a requirement in your budget publication to estimate where your fund balances are at the end of the year. This helps with that also. So they're estimating expenses and revenues because of course you can actually, you know, have positive results on a revenue too by over collecting, which would help out with, you know, your fund balance toward the end of the year. So they will key in estimated actuals along with what they're requesting for the next year, which would be the 2024 budget. Once that happens and departments have keyed that in, we can lock that module down so that departments can't change that any longer. And then what that allows us to do then is we will have different iterations of the budget. We'll have department requested, we'll have, like administrator approved. And then, at the county, if the finance executive committee looks at it and massages it and then sends it to the board or whatever your process is, we can keep up to like 4 different iterations or 5 iterations of the budget. So that you can see how it progressed from department requested through ultimately till adopted budget. So we want to lock people out because of course we don't want it to change at any point in time unless it was an approved change by whatever level the budget was sitting at. So in August, departments will be able to enter up through the 11th, those actual estimated actuals and their requests. Then the administrative review would occur, which I can almost assure you that people aren't going to know things. They're not going to know what to estimate for this or whatever, or they're going to key it in wrong. It just needs to be looked at by people in the administrative area to like see where that's at and fix that in the department requested column before we move to the next step. So that review kind of occurs there. Then Dan can, have time to meet with departments, kind of go through what their requests are, why they're requesting it, some justification, things like that. And then ultimately meeting with their home committee, parent committee to share their budgets and starting through the process of the board approval. Let's see, Dan, can you roll down just a little bit there, please? So then ultimately, it will be compiled and published for the budget hearing that would occur, in November, and then move on forward for adoption. So any questions on anything with regard to the schedule?
I just want to point out, Finance Committee will be getting the drafts in August and September and October. So you guys will know where we're at and can make any recommended changes at those points too. So, and then Chair Berlin will decide if there's special meetings needed.
Go ahead.
I got 2 questions. The first one's for Dan. So in June, any new positions, et cetera, or job descriptions, whatever, have to be approved. Are we still going to switch over to the job descriptions in the wage study? And if so, where does that fit into this process?
So the wage study is approved, and it affects the July 1st, starting July 1st payroll. So the job descriptions are still coming, but the wages have already been set.
So, but in June, the job descriptions are based, my impression is it's based on what we're currently doing. And yet when we hit the end of June, we're looking at putting something else in. And so is exec and whoever going to look at the job descriptions going forward?
Yes.
As opposed to what we've been doing?
Right. And so what in June is actually any new positions anybody wants to hire or changes to positions. So I can tell you, like, land conservation has a change that they're looking at because they don't know what the state is going to do for reimbursements yet.
But that would be consistent with what's in the wage study instead of what we were doing. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other question I had, well, I guess this is probably a Dan question too, but maybe a Steve. So you got September 5th through 15th to meet with the home committees. Are we going to schedule meetings for those committees sooner than later so everybody on those committees knows they have a meeting in that
Yes.
September 5 to 15 window?
Yes.
For planning purposes?
So the 5 to 15 is when I'm meeting with departments meet with me. The whole month of September is where home committees.
Right. So
meet.
September.
So yeah, so some of them are already set, like we know, like HHS already has a set date. PPLE already has a set date. I think highway does too.
So I'm reading that as September in the window of 5 to 15.
No, that's when the departments meet with me.
meet with you, but then there's another bullet behind after, which doesn't have any dates with
Right,
it.
so it's just the month of September. Because each committee is going to meet at different times. So like I said, the HHS meeting will be when they present their budget to HHS committee. So that would be,
Okay, so the second bullet is this month of September as opposed to the 5 through 15.
Correct.
Okay. all
so
right,
I'm just pulling up the
Okay.
calendar here.
Yeah, and I think that says, basically they would meet with their home committee after they met with the administrator up through the October board meeting, just sometime in there, right?
So right now, I mean, these are HHS is the only one scheduled. But the other committees will have to schedule meetings in September. And we'll get these on the calendar as soon as they're scheduled.
Dan, just one follow-up to the implementation of the wage study.
Yep.
So in July, now you've already had the discussions with the department heads. Those negotiations have all been done. The executive committee changes that have been requested are all done. So it's all done. We're just waiting for that July date and it goes into effect.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, and we got lucky in that the payroll period actually starts on July 1st too. But that's how we budgeted it back in November to start July 1.
So, any other questions regarding the kind of proposed timetable for the budget?
Well, just as a chair, Mike here, let me pose a question to Sue. How's everything going? Good? You got it? Great. I like that word.
No, it's going great. We, like Steve alluded to, we're currently working on the audit there on site. And I think that that's going really great. And just the extra help from Steve and Mike has been unbelievable. So I think that we're really moving forward in a positive way.
So
So
I just don't want to forget our people, and you're in the trenches, this is where the rubber meets the road and this is where things get done. And that's your office.
well, thank you. I mean, the help and the assistance and just working together with them has really made a big difference. So once we get these last few things implemented, I think that moving forward, we'll be much more efficient in the office. So
I like that.
I just thank you for all those things that were uncomfortable, but you pushed through.
we're good.
Because this was a big undertaking and it still is getting all this finished. So there's not enough thank yous to put out in words or paper, anything to express how thankful I am for all
Well,
that you've got.
You know that it's been kind of brutal, Laura, but we're trying and I think we're getting there. We're very, very close. So I appreciate you being diligent with that and giving the push because sometimes you need that little cattle prod and we're making it happen. So
Thank you, Sue. Good. With that, let's move on. Was there a contract extension for MWK?
That's Mike and Steve. So their contract will expire in June. And so we're requesting an extension to the end of the year.
I'll make the motion that we extend this contract with, where are we? MWK till the end of the year as proposed.
I have a motion by Laura and second by Blake to extend his contract to the end of the fiscal year or calendar year, excuse me.
Same thing. It's the same thing.
Same thing. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
Okay. We don't.
Oh, thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Steve.
For
Thanks,
the
Steve.
support, the kind words, and I would just like to say, I think Ashland County has been a true joy to work with. Your employees, Sue, Amber, Pete, prior to him leaving, everybody we've worked with. has been more than willing to make changes. Certainly you've had challenges. It didn't go probably 100% to like as quickly as we'd like. But, you know, there are road bumps in the kind of road of change. And, you know, everybody's been great. I've certainly appreciated it and enjoyed, you know, working with everyone. So I just, including the committee here, you guys have been awesome. So thank you. Do you need me to hang on for anything else, Dan?
No, I don't think so. Thank you, Steve.
Okay,
Unless you want to, of course.
Just a
Sure.
sec. In this next piece, it does say the administrator and contract finance directors recommend that the request be denied, so I'd like him to stay on for some questions.
oh,
All right, vehicle purchase for VA or Veterans Department.
I'll let John, he has a request if you want to.
Good morning. So I'm John, I'm the Veteran Service Officer. I'm asking permission to purchase a new car for the Veteran Service Office. The car that we currently have is 10 years old. It started to rust out. I have to wait to make an appointment here coming off of this meeting to have the airbags replaced on the passenger side. We're starting to get the warning light popping up on the dash. So that's going to have to get looked at. It's a safety issue. But I did some searching around as far as buying versus leasing on Dan's recommendation. And I spoke with Nate over at the sheriff's office, just so I could better understand everything that was going on with the leasing program that he's putting together for the sheriff's office. And my understanding and Nate's agreement is that the advantages with the lease is that it allows you to take cars that are high mileage and therefore high maintenance schedules and replace them every 3-4 years, with the maintenance being taken care of under the contract of that lease. Well, in the case of our office, we don't have a high mileage vehicle. The current vehicle we have is 10 years old. Without it being high mileage, we don't have the included high maintenance requirements to go along with it. Currently with the used car market the way it is, the written quote that I got from Von Holsten is valued the car at $6,500 for trade-in. That's a little bit more than half of our original purchase price for that car. With the trade-in for this car back in 2013, we paid $12,200. And so 10 years later, being able to get $6,500 for it, I think is really good, reflecting the current used car market. And I'd hate to lose that because we just crossed over 50,000 miles with this car, which means the depreciation on it is going to start to accelerate, which means the longer I wait to replace this thing, the more money it's going to cost me. Most importantly for the committee, I think it's important to mention again, as I did in the letter, this is at no cost to the county. The entire purchase cost would be covered by state grants that we have in my account. And so with that, I'd like to ask permission to go ahead and do this.
Discussion?
Y'all look at me because I said I had questions. I'm wondering where the rub is here, why this is being recommended for denied. As someone who worked at a Ford dealership, those journeys, good call on it. You're right. These, it might have that cute little mileage behind it, but it is their base model of a crossover vehicle. I honestly don't like them. The safety of our CVSO, and I don't know if you transport anybody in there?
The main purpose for having our vehicle is to transport veterans to and from their medical appointments over in Superior, Hayward, Duluth, even as far as Iron Mountain, Michigan sometimes.
Okay, so then I see a problem with this if we're gonna continue, because if everybody else looked at the bills that have come from this, these are the things that are gonna start going wrong, and it's not gonna stop. This is just the beginning of the cascade on this vehicle. It's the Patriots and the Journeys are that lower tier from Jeep. As to which situation is the best, I mean, my thought is if, I don't know, if we're thinking we can keep this vehicle, I'm up in the air. I'd rather see it off at auction and onto someone else's bills. But as for a full purchase, I don't know that if that would be the best. If we just did not have a car to trade in and worked through like, had it underneath the Ashland County tier and the payments came out from the CVSO grant. Is that something workable? There's got to be a solution here because, like I said, I don't want to see our veterans all driven around in something that I pretty know is going to start failing constantly. And that's not, these appointments with the VA and for the vets are hard to come by. I help try to schedule those all the time. So thoughts?
Ron?
I took a look at the car and I noticed on the door you have a little healthy patch of rust there. Did you happen to get a estimate on what that might cost to get it fixed or anything?
No, I didn't. I looked at, well, as I already said, I don't want to repeat myself, but it's with the maintenance costs that are looking to go up with the increasing depreciation that we have coming up. The fact that it's 10 years old, I said, this is a reasonable time to look at turning in the car. I didn't look at the cost of getting that rust patch fixed.
Okay.
So why was there a recommendation to say no to this?
It's only got 51,000 miles on it. The car is in good condition otherwise. It's had very minor repairs. My wife drives a 10-year-old car, has over 100,000 miles, and it's perfectly fine. I mean, most people are buying these older vehicles, are using these older vehicles for much longer now. It doesn't make sense to spend 30 grand on a car when you have one that's,
Well, then that's a bit over 20.
well, it's 28, it said, 28, 29.
Yeah.
Once you add taxes, well, we wouldn't have to pay taxes, but I mean, once you add everything else in, you're going to be at close to 30.
So where I've struggled with vehicles, first with the city council 8 years and now to the county. My truck is an 02, my car is a 98. Pretty much nobody would get a new vehicle if it were just up to me. But I've listened in my time in political office to why people need new vehicles. It's the same with tractors, by the way. I have spent under 20 grand on vehicles in my entire life, and I hit 65 next month. So where I struggle with this whole topic is I wouldn't replace any of these unless they absolutely die or it's abundantly clear that a new vehicle is needed. I'm not into cars that get me to A and B, and as long as economically they work, I wouldn't replace them. But there's always an argument why we replace cars, trucks, highway equipment. And, it's always this point of how much downtime, how much staff time, how much limits that allows us to do. During COVID, I had met with John several years ago now and actually stopped in his office one day. It's when I first met him before I was, I believe, on the board, to thank him because I had students who were vets who so much appreciated the assistance. And I knew how much that mattered to them because until those things were resolved in their lives, they couldn't focus on doing something beyond that. So I know how important that was. I had an appointment, a VA appointment during COVID, and it was in the winter, and my car is, a 98. And I chose not to go down to an appointment because I wasn't sure about that vehicle. And so when I think about some of the people that you transport, and I think about the dead of winter, And I think about problems where if you're transporting people who sometimes that's not an easy thing to be stuck on the road with if you have problems, et cetera. I feel supportive of this. The mileage is low, yes, the age, there's things that wear out, and then there's just simply fatigue. Like if you leave your car in the sunlight a lot, your tires will deteriorate more from the sunlight, from fatigue, and other parts will also, as opposed to the wear and tear. So even though the mileage is low, that fatigue factor, and then you're hitting some things where it's repair. I'm not really knowledgeable about this vehicle versus that I'm holding up. You can read whatever. I'm just not into vehicles, other than get me to A and B and not cost me money for repairs. But it just strikes me that so often when it comes to our vets, people want to stand up and cheer and wave the flag when we send them off to war and do whatever. But then when they come back, as a nation, we often aren't very good about stepping up and saying, hey, let's back up all that we say about supporting our vets when moments like this come. My inclination is to support this because I think it's really important that you have a reliable vehicle when you're transporting people, because the risk of failure there has consequences that none of us should be comfortable with if something happens. It's a little different if we're within the county limits doing whatever, and you're not transporting someone like a vet, especially someone who, because of age or health concerns or both, that turns into a really inconvenient event. So I'm not convinced we should say no to this. And I would lean towards saying yes to this.
So
Mike, go ahead.
does this vehicle sit outside all the time? Yeah. I also have gone round and round. I mean, it's costing us nothing. And so for me, as a finance committee person, like if this person, you could take yourself out of the room, but there's no cost to us as a county. This is for what we all want to support. I'm supportive as long as it's not costing me money, and it's not, so I'll support it.
Well, it is though, because that VSO grant money should have been used to offset wages in the VSO office instead of piling up in an account. So it is actually costing the county. What we should have been doing is transferring that money, just transfer that whole account money into the general fund, because it really should have paid wages in the past.
We have a question, Chairman. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. By the grant agreement that we have to sign every year with this grant, Dan and I both have to sign it, and the agreement states that the funds cannot be put into the general fund. They must be put into a non-lapsing separate account, which cannot be used by any other department.
Except paying wages in the Veterans Department is an acceptable use of that money. So that's where it should have been, especially given the fact the county had financial problems all these years. We're piling up money in an account where the county could have used that revenue for some of its expenses.
And I think this topic of discussion is, and my guess is this is one of the reasons why you are asking for the vehicle now, as perhaps waiting a little bit. But I'm also very cognizant of the fact that this committee and the board have not been asked to move this money prior to this point in time, yet we've moved some other money. There have certainly been some issues with our past practices in this county in terms of how things have run. No question. But what I'm comfortable with is we resolve the discussion that just happened here in terms of how those grants are used. And if it's for wages, how we change whatever it is that we need to with our accounting system, with our practices, so that we move forward in a way that's understandable to everybody and, backed by the, the finance committee and board. But that money that's sitting there, we haven't changed that I don't know if we've changed that practice yet, and I don't know why if we haven't.
Well, we did in this year's budget.
So we did in this year's budget. And there's lots of things in the past with this county that really have been eye-opening, to put it mildly. But I still think when I've thought about this since I read this a few days ago, to me, it still comes down to all too often, we don't do as much to support our vets as we say that we do. And that vehicle at that age, I still think, and given some of the trips you make and the weather you went in, and I think about a trip I didn't make that in retrospect, I wish I would have made, that it was because I didn't trust the vehicle. Or I didn't want to trust it in the dead of the winter. It turned out to be one of those really, really cold days, so I canceled out. But I still lean towards supporting it and then changing our practices on accounting so that we can move forward, from that, if that's what we should be doing. And, you can accept as far as a change in how those grants are administered and the purposes they're used for. It seems like some common ground or middle ground on something where there's not agreement. So.
Well, I have a question toward John. You only got the one estimate from Von Holzen? You get another estimate from anyone else?
You're talking about the trade-in value?
Yeah.
I got estimate from Ashland Ford as well, and they gave me an estimate of $7,500, $1,000 more. However, when at the same visit, when I was looking, short story, they never got back to me with any kind of an offer, with any kind of an available vehicle once we told them what we were looking for. I waited about 2 weeks and I called them back and I said, hey, I'm waiting to try to purchase a vehicle. What do you have for me? And the salesman said, I'm still waiting to see if we can come up with something, come up with a vehicle for you. So at that point, I said, okay, thank you very much. And I went over to Von Holzen. And Von Holzen had one on the lot and gave us the written offer that you see in the packet the same day. They gave us $1,000 less on the trade-in value, but he had the vehicle right there ready to go.
Dick, you had a question?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. We can analyze this thing to death. We have an opportunity to get a brand new car for nothing. There comes a time when you have to inject a little bit of common sense here. There's nothing here to argue about as far as I'm concerned. He needs a car. The car is getting old. It's rusting out. It's got miles on it. I don't see where there's even a discussion on this. We don't get this opportunity very often where somebody offers us something for nothing. And in this case, it's cut and dried. We're going to get a new car for nothing. End of story. Thank you.
Laura's up next.
Couple things. And again, I can see the clause right in the application for county veteran service grant. It says grant funds shall be maintained in a separate account subject to audit by the Department of Veterans Affairs. I get that we moved that. I am. Anyways, it says that the funds should be maintained in a separate account. I know we used it for like some kind of structural piece inside of ours. I don't know what I think about that, but the thing is, my concern about the outright purchase is that there is going to be another arm wrestling struggle the next time you need a vehicle. And if we get you on that lease thing, even if we do sell out the vehicle to somebody else, because you said that they won't take the lower mile vehicles? Is that what
No,
or it's just the intent?
I'm confused. I don't know what you mean, but
So,
Or I think you have it backwards.
okay,
The enterprise would take the vehicle, for sure.
Um,
John's concern is that he doesn't drive enough miles to justify the lease.
because with the lease, you have the initial down payment on the car will equate it to a purchase price, even though we know as a lease, it's less than that. Then I have the continuous monthly payments for the entire life of the vehicle. At the end of 3 or 4 years, when we trade it in again, I have another initial purchase price.
okay,
Okay.
gotcha.
I don't have unlimited funds to have a payment forever.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. All right, I'm still in support of this, so.
So if you know, 51,000 is, you know, there's certainly life in it yet, but it's to a point where you want to take it on some of these longer trips in the dead of winter with passengers like you take. Is there a way that this county could use this vehicle within the county somewhere else and extend the county's use of that vehicle? Maybe Health and Human Services, if they're running, you know, around city of Ashland, you know, things like that and stuff. So they're not so far away from things if the thing dies or breaks. In other words,
I think because of the trade that you're getting, you almost got to take that because we're only paying, I mean, if you look at what he paid purchase price to what they're giving him trade, I mean, the transaction makes all sense to buy new from Von Holzen on a 3-year loan at low percentage, right? I think that's where we've done the math. I actually agree with Dick here. I think we're overcomplicating it. I would make a motion to approve this if we're at that point. So he's got the money.
I have the money for an outright purchase. Now, Von Holsten wrote it up two ways for us.
Yeah.
One with financing, which he estimated, I think it was 1.9%. I don't have it. You know, but that is, you know, wouldn't be finalized until the date of the financing. So we had, and the difference between the outright purchase, you know, cash purchase of the car and the financing purchase was, I think it's $500. Yeah, I have 28,700 for the financed and 28,200 for the cash price.
Well, I'm gonna say for one thing that we'll get a much better trade-in value on Wisconsin surplus auction. We're selling beat up old sheriff's department cars for $5-6 grand. We have a 4-wheeler on right now that's at $4 grand. Or Lori, how much is do you know how much the 4-wheeler is on auction for right now?
That auction ended and we received $22.50 for it.
For a beat up old 4-wheeler, and we got what, 14,000 for 3 sheriff's department cars
Yep.
that had 100 and some thousand miles on them. And
For us to have to go through the process of, if it's an easy process for us to sell it and we can make more money, Von Holzen's really wouldn't care on that side. They'd still honor the purchase price of 28. So if we can get more money by the county ways and means, then I would still support the purchase of this vehicle, selling it, the used one through the county's or the website that you were mentioning.
Okay, he's not looking. Would you take a friendly amendment to them to figure out the best way of doing this and just approving the purchase?
Yes, I would definitely take that.
Okay, because then I will second that.
Okay, so could I hear what the motion is, please?
Just to approve the purchase.
The motion was to approve the purchase using the trade-in, the most effective way to trade the vehicle in, cost effective.
Efficient, yeah.
Thank you.
so from a budget standpoint, both present and going forward. So in the future, you said in the future, these grants would go into the aligned in the general fund for use. You've had some money separate in your office from those grants that you want to use from this. And without looking, is there monies beyond the cost for this vehicle in there? And what is going to happen to those monies? Because I think part of what we're doing here is we're understanding something's going to change in terms of where funds come from. And therefore we have to understand whether you, and I don't want to say whether you have money in your budget, because apparently that's going to change, you know, going forward. But is there other monies beyond this that's?
Well, the account is roughly 61,000.
And so can you tell me if he's going to be allowed to use that for his office with his discretion on how that is expended under rules that are allowed?
It's really up to this committee.
Are you going to ask us to move the balance of that to the general fund for VA purposes
I think Mike and Steve are gonna making that request.
during budget season?
Yeah.
And John, are you aware of that's what's going to be considered?
There we go. Now it's on. No, I wasn't aware of that. This is new. My understanding, reading from what Lori read out, from the state statute, is that our funds, the grant money goes into a separate line of accounting, which is a non-lapsing account. And the money cannot be put into the general fund to be used by other departments.
Right, so it has to be
So-
dedicated for you. So I think,
Right.
and I think this is the crux of what Dan said and has been the crux of the discussion for several years, is the county has been using property tax dollars to pay compensation in the VA office, whereas the money that you're getting from that grant has been accruing in an account that you had control over. And the monies you've been receiving should have been going to pay wages over the years as opposed to property taxes dollar being used. So what Dan is suggesting is that, wait a minute, the money that's sitting there, that 61K should really come back to the general fund to be used, earmarked in a separate line for your office, wages and other things that are appropriate.
They can be used that way. They don't have to be used that way because those monies are also to be used for funding activities that our office may do, like, with outreach, with helping to pay for conferences, paying for membership fees, paying for all these different things that we have just as our standard operating costs is also be coming from those funds. It's not just for wages.
So I think, we need to address this whole issue of the money he receives, where it goes, and then what it's used for and approved through the budget process. So that we're done with that this year. If you are confident that you could get a new vehicle, say a year or 2 or 3 in the future, if you were confident that you could get it, would you still make this request today?
Yes, I would, just purely because of a safety factor.
Okay. All right, thank you.
We have a motion on the floor here, but I need to ask a point of clarification. The cost of this vehicle is $28,208. They're proposing to give us $6,500 for that trade-in, which brings us down to $21,708. No,
No, the initial cost of the vehicle is 34. And then subtracting the 6,500 brings it down to the 28 range.
that's why I asked for a point of clarification. Thank you.
You just have to sign.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still here. I just converted to my phone, so if you hear other noises, please understand. So just to kind of give my spin on this, I think what you've discussed is correct. The CVSFO funding is intended to offset the cost for the office. And I think, Pat, you had described it perfectly, that the county did levy for that. It certainly can be used to offset the office. That's what it's intended for. It's not doing any veterans any good sitting in an account right now either. So I would suggest, you guys can make whatever decision you choose to do with the vehicle. That's, your decision to decide the safety factors and things like that. And then our recommendation would be we could move that money from the special fund that it's into the general fund and designate it for veteran purposes, if that's what the committee wishes to do. And all that can certainly be accomplished and get that done, yet this year. So.
I would like to call the question.
Okay.
Lori, roll call, please. Oh, you need a second.
Do we need
I'll
to
second it.
So Lori, can you
No.
do a roll call?
We had a second by Laura. Yep, give me one
And this is to call the question.
Yeah, the motion is on the call in question.
Mike Berlin,
Yes.
Laura Negro,
Yes.
Blake Elfson,
Yes.
Pat Kinney,
Yes.
Ron Stendor,
Yes.
Okay, the question's been called. No further debates allowed. So there has to be a vote on the motion by Mr. Ellison. And that does not have to be a roll call.
Can we read the motion?
Yes, you can read the motion. Lori, can you please read it back?
motion by Blake to approve purchasing using the most cost-effective way a new vehicle for the Veteran Service Office. Is that correct, Blake?
That sounds great.
And who second?
Lori did.
Lori second. Okay. With that, call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. You get your vehicle. Item next, Town of Sanborn, discussion.
There's not much to discuss. It's a standing agenda item. We're still waiting for the state to do what they do. I will make a note. I will make one note that is a little bit interesting that I told Chairman Pufall yesterday and Chair Berlin yesterday. The town of Sanborn's assessor took a commercial property and put it back on the tax roll. So it'd be the Three Eagles Smoke Shop. So, and they said because it's a business, that I don't know where that's gonna go, but if that is a correct action, then that means all LLCs, subchapter S, C Corps, everybody on the reservation would be taxable. So I don't know where that's going yet, but I just letting you know it's out there. Yeah, we're not doing anything until we get the DOR tell us you do something.
Item next, LCO versus Beaver's resolution.
All right, so this resolution has to be passed by the county board before June 19th or so. So it's gonna be on the June 6th agenda. And this is Bayfield County's passing almost the exact same resolution. And it's really asking to make us whole.
Any discussion? Pat, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
And Ron seconds. All those in favor? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. So this now goes to the county board?
Yeah, on the June 6th agenda for the county board.
Okay.
Okay, so joint dispatch, again, this is a standing agenda item. There's no updates yet. We expect to hear back from Department of Military Affairs in the next couple weeks on whether or not we receive the grant.
Health insurance?
I think M3 already gave that update.
Beat that up. And investments.
They're in the packet. Everything looks good.
Getting close to lunch or
Yeah.
we're pushing this.
So sales tax is next. That's in the packet and the sales tax numbers seem to be holding up compared to last year. So that's good news. And if anybody's noticed, the traffic's gotten a lot worse in town, so tourist season has started. As far as updates I have, I think we covered everything already. I'll take questions though. So the town of La Pointe, the DOR has until the end of June to make their decision. But yes, I think it's very okay.
Anything else?
So
We covered a lot today, so.
next meeting, does June 20th work for everybody?
Clean sweeps that day. Do you have the hours for clean sweep offhand?
It starts at like noon or something or 1.
Okay, yeah, I think it's just the afternoon. It used to be, throughout the day, but yeah. if it's
Yeah.
just Afternoon, yeah,
Yeah, I told Lisa that I would show up at that.
okay, yeah, so the 20th is okay.
Yeah.
And then I was gonna ask you, as we do finance meetings through budget season, are you looking at the schedule that Mike and Steve laid out? So
Yeah, and
our
I
meeting,
believe there's probably gonna be extra budget meetings the finance committee does. But that's gonna be up to you guys when we get to that point.
so it fits what Mike and Steve have
Yeah.
laid out as far as
Yep.
picking something.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'd expect an extra meeting in September,
Okay,
maybe August,
all right.
October probably. Well, because I mean, we want to get the budget completely wrapped up by October 17th, I think it is. Because it has to get published in the paper 17 days before. And so November 7th is the target date to pass the budget. I'd like to actually get it in, pass it in October if we can, to be honest.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Motion by Blake to adjourn, a second by Laura. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Have a good day.
Your name appeared on the
Have a
credit
great
report.
weekend.